Recently, Overkill launched a new beta, which aims to address some of the issues with the 1-down difficulty. Personally, I found 1-down to be hugely over the top, with many of my issues being grounded in both the enemy health tweaks that rolled out at the same time, along with the generally poor weapon balance at the time that essentially demanded specific types of weapons and skills in order to have even a remote chance of succeeding. Also the fact that I suck at the game in general, but hey. That's not to suggest 1-down was impossible without these meta builds, but for too many playstyles it involved hunkering down in the smallest corner you can find and waiting for upwards of 7 or 8 minutes at a time, waiting for waves upon waves of tanky enemies to drop and rush any objectives that needed doing in the 10 or so seconds of break the game grants, or systematically longing out the end part of an assault by leaving select key enemies alive to draw out that brief window. The latest beta aims to alleviate this reliance on meta builds in several ways. Firstly, no more 1-down restriction. That's becoming an option that can be applied to any difficulty. My main issue with 1-down as a mechanic is its reliance on increasing punishment to increase difficulty, rather than increasing other aspects of the game such as enemy counts, damage output, time between aiming at a player and shooting, or decreasing the chance a cop will miss a shot. Increased punishment is an odd restriction on the players not present in other difficulties, but is something the player can select through things like mutators by making only bulldozers spawn or having killed cops split into weaker counterparts that increase the threat of a downed enemy significantly. So if this becomes a mutator, or perhaps even some kind of option you can select to increase rewards in a similar manner to the pro jobs of the past, that would be a great way to utilise it. Secondly, the enemy AI has been revamped to be more consistent across different computers. Prior to this patch, enemies functioned very differently between a low-end computer and a high-end one. It left me essentially unable to host for the longest time, as going into a game where entire groups of enemies are moving in sync with each other and storming my hideouts before I had a chance to clear the last batch just isn't fun, and it made even the likes of Deathwish and Mayhem basically unplayable for me without a good team. Host your own game, my fucking arse. But hopping into someone else's game, I could often hold my own on Deathwish and even 1-down with suboptimal builds without batting an eye, because suddenly enemies were taking several seconds to notice me mowing down their allies. These changes will make a lot of things better in general for online play, largely because you won't get idiots who've only played with low-end hosts constantly going down when they rush out through the cops and wonder why they got riddled with 1,000 bullets. And thirdly, enemy health has been nerfed to that of Deathwish difficulty. As alluded to, I'm not a big fan of the health changes in general when it comes to difficulty, especially when the old style had much more enemy variation with the likes of blues, greens, tans and gensec elites all spawning regularly among each other in a clusterfuck of increasingly large numbers, rather than simply sending many same-styled health-buffed units in a mass of blue, brown, grey or black. The general goal here appears to be attempting to ease the reliance on the meta builds of the past, particularly the 9 lives Swansong Feign Death Messiah dodge build that's been prevalent throughout the difficulty for so long. Feign Death, Messiah and 9 lives allow a player to remain self-sustainable, granting them an additional down, which realistically ruined the entire concept of the game mode, and giving them several means of upping themselves so teammates didn't have to run into awkward situations to get them back up. Then Swansong just let you cast down a rain of thunderous explosions with your grenade launcher of choice for 9 or now 6 seconds whenever you were downed, letting you thin out a crowd without any real downside. And without these skills you were essentially left helpless unless an Inspire skilled teammate rushes by to shout you up, or you were forced to hang around in dark corners just pinging anything that moves for the majority of your gameplay time, which to me at least just isn't fun. I generally enjoy a bit of a piss around when I'm playing any game, and not being able to do that, while granted on the hardest difficulty, still makes it a little bit tedious for me to play. So then, to test these new changes, I made a few builds based on a suggestion I could find online and a couple of older builds I've run in the past. And in this video we'll go through them, we'll try and find out which builds work, which builds won't, and we'll try and come to some conclusion as to whether 1-down is even a redeemable difficulty, even if that is just in my own shit at games opinion. So without further ado, Firstly, I have the 1 down meta build, which I found after the briefest bit of searching I could manage. The light crossbow seemed like an odd choice to me at first, but being able to pick basically any enemy I want dead and snap them down in an instant, along with never really needing to rely on ammo bags to keep myself functional as an attacker, was surprisingly effective. The China Puff grenade launcher was more than enough to keep the crowds thin, and useful for dispersing the enemies into stagger animations to make running past them towards objectives much easier. Also great for removing the threat of SWAT turrets in a couple of shots, and it has relatively excellent ammo pickup. As already explained, the various life-bringing skills definitely helped me in a few instances. Having an extra down between medic bags prolonged my life, occasionally leaping straight back into action after tanking it, wiping out the room I'm down in so my allies can grab me, and being able to pick myself up when all else fails all help to get us through the heist without much issue. Jokers are an obvious choice, giving you additional expendable meat shields to draw enemy fire, and help clear out a few extra enemies without needing to even pay attention. Just be sure to keep grabbing replacements when they finally fall, else you might end up being in the situation I was in a few times through the heist where I was relying on my converts to actually protect me, and they were no longer existent. Stockholm Syndrome further improves survivability, allowing you to get your hostages to automatically release you from custody a single time for free right in the middle of an assault, which is incredibly useful, and I really don't give this skill enough credit in my normal builds. Everything else is just dodge and speed related, doing everything possible to make sure enemies can't hit you. Spoiler alert, this build worked the best by a huge margin, and is one that I would definitely recommend you try out if you haven't yet tried the 1 down difficulty. Feel free to end the video here if you were just looking for a good build for 1 down, because this one's fantastic. Considering I'm crap at 1 down anyway, and even on Death Wish I'm pretty poor, I was able to go through 1 down with very little issue. Onto the second build, Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat, which I used on an earlier couple of videos and is my current Death Wish build, largely thanks to the damage buff LMG's got recently. The additional damage, along with the 25% stagger on all enemies from heavy impact and pretty much guaranteed stagger on shields with shock and awe, I was successfully able to hold down the horde with a lot of spray and pray, with just barely enough armour to break through choke points. The enhanced body shot damage from body expertise certainly helped thin out the opposition without too much trouble, and the renewed ammo pickup for the LMGs is so good now I never needed to use the 2 ammo bags my skill set grants me, making them pure utility for the rest of the team, to the point where it'd be worth me going as doctor bags. I also took an RPG to deal with the tougher units where needed, though the increased health of dozers did make it feel a little puny, requiring 2 of its maximum 4 shots to take them out. It's a shame that the dozer killing boomstick has lost a fair bit of its effectiveness since the health buffs, and I feel like given its pathetic ammo efficiency and incredibly long reload, they could quite happily buff it back to being the game's one-shot answer to the game's tankiest units, regardless of difficulty. Though I did suffer a few downs under custody at one point, the build works a lot better purely thanks to the additional lives and the LMG buffs, adding far more survivability in general. Being able to take a little more risk, and as such being able to have a little more fun in a high difficulty setting, was much appreciated.
Up one here.
Risking it for a biscuit!
Oh!
Yeah!
Oh man.
Worth it! I found the toy!
Yeah! The endless search is over.
The third build I tried was Bullfozer! The one I made originally for maximum damage reduction. Back then my testing for it was not great to say the least. While on Death Wish I was basically invincible, besides this little fucker. On 1 down I would be removed faster than a pimple against a razor blade and turned into a similarly grotesque puddle of blood and pus, and really it's much the same here. The damage reduction provided by the various skills really didn't amount to much, and my shotguns, while effective in some situations, left a lot to be desired whenever I needed to stop and reload, or when enemies crowded around me rather than clustered together in my line of sight. Perhaps a tweak in weaponry might improve this build a bit, but with so many points thrown into the various damage reducing skills, there's not a lot I can do besides running some kind of DMR assault rifle, or just running the same weapons as the one down meta build from before, and really that kind of defeats the whole point of me trying out these various builds. I also went into custody twice in this mission just from enemies spawning in huge numbers I simply couldn't keep up with. Nearly every time I turned away from a door, a group rushed in and downed me before I could react. Now this isn't including the additional damage reduction and absorption granted by a crew chief and a maniac like I had help with in my maximum video, but either way I don't think they'd help all that much. I did notice I could take 3 or 4 hits while armour was up, which was a breath of fresh air compared to watching my 280 armour vanish in a couple of hits on Rat-a-tat, but the significantly reduced health from Frenzy was definitely noticeable in a few instances, so realistically this isn't a build that's going to work very well on one down, and even on Death Wish you'd probably be better off just going with better weapons to be able to keep your own team up rather than yourself.
Medic also.
Ah, you twat.
Nice.
Oh my god, these guys are tanky as fuck! It's taken me about 5 shots to kill each one. Finally, I brought along the ultimate test. Basically, this was my go-to build back before the big difficulty update way back when, where green units always had 130 health, where tans always had 200 health no matter what the difficulty, and HRTs spawned between waves of enemies, God rest their forever custodied souls. Essentially, this build would generally one-shot any enemy I headshot, and the effect of Trigger Happy would stack up quickly and remain active throughout a game without too much trouble. This was an akimbo pistol dodge build, and still is one of my favourite ways to play the game, largely because I find it hilarious that a suit-clad heister is leaping in with dual pistols, taking out crowds of machine guns, shotguns, LMGs, and now SWAT turrets and miniguns, and taking it all out with ease. All the Shimano compacts heavily modified, 60 dodge, super fast speed, inspire, all the things a growing heister needs to succeed. This one worked surprisingly well, though it definitely didn't feel effortless. The dodge dice rolls were with me that day, and the renewed buff to Trigger Happy helped keep my pistols in prime condition, despite the heavy nerf my damage output took from the lack of silencer buffs, though I kept the silencers equipped for the sake of that increased accuracy and stability, and purely to test the extent of the changes made to the not one down difficulty. Pretty much all of the gunslinger skills carried my pistol's utility as expected, and I remained fairly useful throughout the level. The additional perks of using high concealment suppressed weapons would also allow me to run in stealth, though the lack of true stealth related skills, and particularly a lack of ECMs, would still hold that back from a pure stealth run. It's only really useful on heists where you kind of have the opportunity to go stealth at the beginning, but at some point you're going to go loud anyway, or it's a heist where everyone's going in with loud builds and they let you run off and try and do as much as you can stealth on your own before jumping in to take out everything else. I still took an unfortunate death however, though largely out of me being impatient and trying to sprint out toward the objective. This was mainly due to the severe ammo shortage we had on this run, both of us running doctor bags while the pistols themselves have a relatively low ammo pickup, and dastardly ammo efficiency thanks to their lower damage output and accuracy compared to many other weapons. It's certainly not a build I would recommend anyone use, but it's definitely an odd little challenge to try and use the game's smallest weapons in a situation where bigger and better usually succeed. Oh my god!
Not even close.
I'm pretty sure that was about as close as you can get. Oh, there wasn't even anything in these. There's one fucking rifle. Besides the fact that I'm still not focused enough to really play 1 down to any serious degree, I think the main takeaway here is that while the changes definitely challenge the current meta and allow a much wider variety of builds to function, it's still going to take a significant amount of preparation and skill to pull off a successful heist. As the game's hardest difficulty, it's understandable that you will go down a few times throughout, even lose a game or two. You need to be ready for that inevitable lose screen and trust that another run will work next time. You need a build focused on buffing a few things, though now you can have a build dedicated around armour, big weapons, or just the same old dodge swansong build without worrying too much about being as optimal as possible. And I'd argue that's a pretty damn good set of changes that increase the accessibility of the difficulty without nerfing the things that made it tough too hard. Just means that Dr. Bags will go a little further than they did before, and makes use of other deployables much more appealing. And that's how a terrible Payday 2 player plays Payday! Try saying that 5 times really fast.